Maggie May obviously turned my whole life around. It was about my first sexual encounter.
What Ron Stewart is facing right now at 80 years old might just be the saddest chapter yet. And the part that will absolutely leave you speechless is that some of these tragedies, they didn't just happen years ago. Some of them are still happening right now.
I was a traitor to rock and roll. I must admit that part of that song I did borrow from a big Brazilian hit.
So, let me just say this. If you think you know Rod Stewart, if you think you've seen his story told before, you haven't heard it like this. Stick with me till the end of this video, because the last part of his story, that's the one that will make your jaw drop. The tragedy of Rod Stewart. At the start of January 2025, when champagne glasses clinked and friends gathered to celebrate his 85th birthday, Rod Stewart looked around and openly admitted something most people at that age quietly think about, but rarely say out loud. He said he was aware that his days were numbered, but he felt no fear. That honesty struck those who heard it, because how many people reach such a milestone and still speak with that kind of boldness? And yet, while most would consider slowing down, Rod Stewart was still not ready to simply step away from the spotlight. He did not want retirement, and he made that point very clear. Even with health challenges creeping in, he continued to chase ambitious schedules and demanding performances, as if to prove to himself and the world that the fire inside him had not dimmed. Back in August 2024, he had been forced to cancel what was supposed to be his milestone 200th Las Vegas residency show. At first, it was just strep throat, but then came COVID-19, and the weight of those setbacks could not be ignored. Yet only weeks later, instead of taking time to rest fully, Stewart began preparing for Glastonbury Festival. His vocal experts warned him that pushing too soon could risk permanent damage to the very thing that had carried him through decades of fame, his legendary voice. Still, Stewart pressed forward. Was it stubbornness, or was it simply the refusal to give up the one thing that gave his life its meaning? But if the physical struggles seemed heavy, there was also another battle running quietly beneath it all: the fight against irrelevance. After announcing the end of large-scale world tours with his One Last Time tour, he still made it known that he had no desire to retire. That tension between facing his limits and refusing to surrender the stage revealed something deeper about him. It showed a man who wanted to stay needed, who wanted the music and the crowds and the applause for as long as possible. Could anyone really blame him? After all, when your entire life has been tied to songs and stages, how do you just turn it off? Those close to him said that Stewart rarely lingered on regrets, but in rare, unguarded moments, he admitted one that continued to weigh on him. He spoke about how, at the height of his career, he had not spent enough time with his older children. That absence, he seemed to acknowledge, could never really be undone. Yet, alongside this sorrow, he had found stability in his marriage to Penny Lancaster. Their relationship had seen its own share of storms, even splitting briefly when Stewart once asked for a framed photo of her so he could look at her when he went to bed, and again when he woke up. That story, as unusual as it sounded, reflected how deeply he wanted her presence, even in moments of distance. Today, their bond stood strong, offering him a sense of calm and grounding as the rest of life continued to shift around him. Still, it was music that kept Stewart's spirit alive. He openly said he planned to enjoy himself for what he believed could be another 15 years, and he claimed he could handle that. Easy, mate, easy. Unlike many of his contemporaries who had quietly stepped away into retirement, he continued to perform, to record, and to show up despite illness, fatigue, and age. It was not just about clinging to fame, it was about clinging to the rhythm that had shaped his entire existence. Music was more than his career. It was his lifeline, his anchor, and his proof to himself that age could not take away his soul. And as one observer noted with awe, It was remarkable how strong and good Rod Stewart still sounded at 80 years old. So, when people looked at him, they did not just see a man in his later years, they saw an artist still battling time, still refusing to fade quietly, and still chasing the rush of a stage that had always felt like home. And really, isn't that the story of Rod Stewart? A man who built his life on songs and never stopped singing, even when the world thought he should rest. He lived through fashion shifts, through critics calling him finished, through fans doubting his strength, and still, he kept chasing that same rush, that same sacred electricity that only comes when the lights hit and the music begins. And that brings us to one of the most heartbreaking and astonishing parts of his journey, something you won't want to miss. So don't even think about blinking until the very end of this story, because here we're talking about the voice that almost disappeared. The voice that almost disappeared. Behind the familiar raspy voice that made Rod Stewart a global icon, there was a frightening struggle that almost silenced him forever. Many people saw the fame, the sold-out concerts, and the charm that never seemed to fade, but few truly understood the terrifying battles he fought with his health behind closed doors. It was in the year 2000, at the age of 55, when Stewart's world shifted dramatically. Doctors had discovered a cancerous tumor on his thyroid gland, and while the news alone was devastating, the real danger lay in where the surgeons would have to operate. They would be working perilously close to his vocal cords, the very gift that defined his career. One wrong move, one tiny slip, and the career that spanned decades could have ended in a single afternoon. He later admitted that the doctors never told him about that particular risk before the operation. "They didn't tell me that when I went in for the operation," he revealed to AARP, "only when I came out." Imagine waking up from surgery and realizing that the thing you feared most, losing your voice, was now a haunting possibility. In the months that followed, that fear became his reality. He recalled how he could still talk, but he could not sing a single note. The man whose voice had carried him from smoky pubs to international stages was now trapped in silence. He was told the recovery might take 6 months, but as the weeks turned into months, nothing changed. 7 months went by, still no voice. 8 months went by. How would anyone in his shoes have coped? For Stewart, the despair was so heavy that he began to consider alternative paths in life. He even joked, though half seriously, that he thought about becoming a gardener, spending his days caring for plants and trees. It was a humbling, even surreal thought for a man who once lived on the energy of roaring stadiums. Yet, 9 months after the surgery, something extraordinary happened. His voice returned, and he described it as having a new kind of warmth, a richness that had not been there before. Was it a miracle, or simply the resilience of a man unwilling to be silenced? Perhaps a little of both. Just when it seemed as though he had endured his greatest test, another health crisis emerged years later. In 2016, Stewart was once again confronted with the word no one wants to hear: cancer. This time, it was prostate cancer. And though the news was a staggering blow, he chose to carry the burden privately. He later admitted that he kept it secret even from his children, saying he did not want to worry them. Alongside his wife, Penny, he lived with the diagnosis in silence for nearly 3 years before speaking about it publicly. One might ask, how does a man so full of life, so energetic, choose to carry such a heavy truth in private? But Stewart's choice reflected the protective instincts of a father and a husband who wanted to shield his family from pain. In his own words, he explained that facing something so potentially life-threatening forces a person to look at life differently. When you are so close to something that is potentially life-threatening, you tend to get your life in perspective, he shared. These trials changed him deeply, reshaping how he valued time, health, and life itself. He often reflected on how lucky he had been, not only to survive these battles, but also to emerge with new strength and appreciation for life. Stewart did not simply survive, he adapted. He turned to physical fitness with renewed dedication, continuing to work with the same trainer he had trusted for almost 4 decades. At 80 years old, he did not slow down in the way most would expect. Instead, he pushed himself even further, sprinting 100 meters on his private track. He proudly shared that he managed it in 19 seconds and ambitiously declared he would try for 17 seconds, a goal he half-joked might even be a world record for someone his age. Was it determination, pride, or simply the spirit of a man who refused to surrender to time? Whatever it was, it revealed something larger. Rod Stewart's story was never just about music, fame, or money. It was about survival, resilience, and a refusal to give in to the things that tried to take him down. His journey raised questions that lingered in the hearts of those who followed his story. How does one rebuild a life when the very thing that defines them is almost stripped away? How does one keep hope alive when month after month passes with no sign of healing? Stewart's story showed that strength is not just in the ability to stand on a stage and sing, but in the patience to wait, the courage to face fear, and the humility to accept new beginnings. Even today, at 80, when many would retreat into comfort and quiet, Stewart keeps running, keeps singing, and keeps proving that sometimes the hardest battles leave behind not scars, but a deeper warmth, a stronger voice, and a story worth telling again and again. And that's exactly why you'll want to stay with me right till the very end of this journey, because what comes next peels back the curtain on where it all began, the raw chaos, the restless hunger, and the moment he started truly finding his voice in the chaos of youth. Finding his voice in the chaos of youth. With football dreams fading into memory, Rod Stewart's path took an unexpected turn through a chaotic series of jobs, musical experimentation, and chance encounters that would ultimately shape his legendary career. After leaving school at 15, Stewart briefly worked as a laborer for Highgate Cemetery, adding another colorful thread to his biographical tapestry. Shortly thereafter, he embraced beatnik attitudes and left-wing politics, becoming an active supporter of the campaign for nuclear disarmament from 1961 to 1963. His political passion led to 3 arrests during sit-ins at Trafalgar Square and Whitehall. Music gradually pulled him into its orbit as he began listening to British and American folk artists like Ewan MacColl, Woody Guthrie, and especially Bob Dylan. By 1962, Stewart was living on a houseboat in Shoreham-by-Sea, busking with folk singer Whiz Jones. The duo took their act on the road, performing in Brighton, sleeping under bridges in Paris, and eventually reaching Barcelona, from which Stewart was unceremoniously deported for vagrancy in 1963. Fate intervened in January 1964 at Twickenham Railway Station. After attending a performance by Long John Baldry and the All-Stars at Eel Pie Island, Stewart was playing Smokestack Lightnin' on his harmonica when Baldry himself overheard him. Recognizing raw talent, Baldry invited the young musician to sit in with his group and, upon discovering Stewart could sing as well, offered him a job for £35 a week after securing approval from Stewart's mother. At 19, Stewart quit his day job and gradually overcame his shyness, becoming known as Rod the Mod due to his dandyish style of grooming and dress. His first ever song with the Hoochie Coochie Men was reportedly met with stony silence from the audience, yet Baldry remained convinced he had discovered something special. Stewart's recording career began modestly in June 1964 with an uncredited appearance on Up Above My Head, the B-side of a Baldry single. Following stints with Steam Packet and Shotgun Express, his breakthrough came in February 1967, when guitarist Jeff Beck recruited him for his post-Yardbirds venture. The Jeff Beck Group, which included future Rolling Stone Ronnie Wood, produced 2 acclaimed albums, Truth and Beck Ola, that blended blues, rock, and psychedelic influences. Yet, despite their success, tensions plagued the band. Stewart later recalled, "I never once looked him in the eye. I always looked at his shirt," or something like that. Eventually, Stewart left in July 1969 following Wood's departure. Stewart had already signed a solo contract with Mercury Records in October 1968, although contractual complexities delayed his recording debut until July 1969. Meanwhile, in May 1969, guitarist Steve Marriott left the Small Faces. Ron Wood replaced him in June, and on October 18, 1969, Stewart followed his friend to become the band's new singer. The renamed group, Faces, would become one of Britain's most popular live acts of the early 1970s. Furthermore, Stewart's adoption of the mod lifestyle in 1963, complete with his iconic spiky rooster hairstyle, created with sugar water or large amounts of his sister's hair lacquer, had positioned him perfectly for the musical revolution to come. That sharp image, paired with his rough, soulful voice, didn't just make Rod Stewart stand out, and positioned him right on the front line of a cultural explosion that was about to completely reshape the sound and style of modern music. He wasn't just another singer trying to make it. He looked the part, he sounded the part, and whether he realized it at the time or not, he was becoming the very symbol of a generation ready to break rules and redefine what it meant to be a star. But here's the thing. As dazzling as that rise might seem from the outside, the real story of what came next is so much more complicated, and honestly, far more heartbreaking than most fans could have ever imagined. So don't even think of looking away now. Keep your eyes locked on the screen, because what's coming next will change the way you see Rod Stewart forever. Fame, excess, and the cost of stardom. The meteoric rise of Roderick Stewart from street performer to international star began with a B-side track that unexpectedly catapulted him to fame in 1971. In an extraordinary achievement for the music industry, Stewart's album Every Picture Tells a Story, and its single Maggie May simultaneously occupied the #1 chart position in the UK, US, Canada, and Australia, a chart first at that time. Written from Stewart's personal experience about his first sexual encounter at the 1961 Beaulieu Jazz Festival, Maggie May initially appeared as the B-side to Reason to Believe, until radio stations began favoring it. At first, I didn't think much of Maggie May, Stewart admitted in 2015. I guess that's because the record company didn't believe in the song. As Maggie May topped charts for 5 weeks in the US and UK, Stewart's solo career quickly overshadowed his work with Faces. His next album, Never a Dull Moment, 1972, and its single You Wear It Well were also hits. Throughout his career, Stewart has produced 10 #1 albums and 31 top 10 singles in the UK, 6 reaching #1. In the US, he scored 16 top 10 singles, with 4 #1 hits on the Billboard Hot 100. Behind the dazzling success lay a tumultuous personal life. Stewart's first marriage to Alana Stewart in 1979 produced 2 children, Kimberly and Sean. Following their divorce in 1984, Stewart dated model Kelly Emberg for 7 years, fathering daughter Ruby in 1987. In 1990, he married model Rachel Hunter, despite their 24-year age gap, welcoming children Renee and Liam before separating in 1999. Rod later revealed, "I felt cold all the time. I knew then why they call it heartbroken. You can feel it in your heart." Most poignant was Stewart's relationship with Sarah Streeter, his firstborn. "She was put up for adoption when I was 17 or 18, he explained. "I was absolutely stone broke." For decades, their relationship remained distant, until Evelyn, Sarah's adoptive mother, died in 2007. "I didn't think that it's a coincidence that our newfound closeness has happened since my adoptive parents passed away," Sarah noted. Despite massive commercial success, Stewart faced personal battles. In 2021, He and son Sean pleaded guilty to battery following a 2019 altercation with a hotel security guard in Florida. The incident highlighted the darker side of fame that often accompanied his public persona. In addition, Sarah battled substance abuse issues, similar to half-siblings Sean and Kimberly. As Stewart reflected on his success, the dichotomy between his global stardom and fractured personal life remained a central theme in his story. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.